Um, well, as chairman of the board, the first thing is your fiduciary duty, as is everybody in the board. In other words, maximizing net present value for our shareholders, our ex-shareholders, was everybody's role in the board. That's the theory. In practice, like I said, so in theory everybody should be aligned. There should not be me and them, and because everybody has the same legal fiduciary obligation. In practice, it's very different. And I hear all kinds of story here in the Atlanta community around different boards and what happens, and certain companies go. So obviously, that's very dependent on what type of board. In our case, I was lucky to have good board dynamics, and this is really something you should think about very early on if you're an entrepreneur. A VC is very attuned to board composition and the difficulties associated with board composition. It's another bit of a black art. In our case, we had retained, after our Series A, we had retained control of the company largely. So that mitigated sort of the dynamics that can go on a board in terms of what do we decide to do, and do we decide to accept this or that offer. Our board remained pretty together, if that makes sense, another word, but it held together in a good way. It gets heated. A lot of F words fly around at the last hours, and and F them, and F this, and F that, and so it's easy to get wrapped up. Guilty. But the board dynamics are very, very important. That's something you set up before the deal. Once the blood is in the water, everybody comes out. Everybody, true colors come out. In our case, it held up. But I've heard of nasty stories of people, think, oh no, we should not sell, and turning around and let's sell right now, things like that. So, board composition, vote control, all of these are issues you should think about. Not that I was aware of them, I'd never gone through that process before, but in retrospect, I got pretty lucky. Let me put it that way. And the people I was with, David Scott specifically of Matrix, was a great advice. That being said, I could really tell the different factions of the board. David was by himself, optimizing, even though legally you can't optimize your personal outcome versus the others. He was always thinking about how can I maximize and help everybody else at the same. That's normal, right? As founders, we're always thinking another way. The independent directors. So again, this is board composition, and this is something a good VC will help you with. What were some of the issues to retain the employees? What were some of the techniques? I didn't get that word. The techniques. Oh, so there's books full of them, right? What I'm going to give is actually a very small subset. Please refer to, there's a lot of ways to do that. Stock options. Usually, somebody will come with an offer and an amount for the shareholders of the company at large, which means it gets divided amongst all shareholders according to their holdings, and an additional employee retainer, okay, which can be significant. In fact, in our case, because we are a open source company, the knowledge is out there, the product's out there, retention was a key issue. And so the retention part of the deal, cash, and I'm talking deal structure now, was significant. In fact, it doesn't get declared in the deal because it's cash compensation on a go-forward basis. And so it was there. Is the point I'm making in our case. That's one way. Additional stock options is a good way. But then, the financial side being taken care of in terms of future potential earnings. In our case, we dealt really with the human nature is human nature. If one of my guys is burnt out and has made a ton of money and wants to walk, he'll walk. Ben Sabrin, which many of you here know and have dealt with in the past, one of our first sales guys, made his money and now he commutes between Las Vegas poker rooms and Atlanta poker rooms. That's what he does. He'll be back at work soon, I think. But human nature says you're not going to be able to retain everybody because some people are just going to walk. But what we did, still in that emotional sphere rather than the cold financial aspect of it, was I was trying to make sure that the place we went to was the right place for the company in terms of continuing our mission, if you would. We were an open source company doing open source software. We had proprietary software companies looking at us. That would have been a big culture difference. That would have been a big culture clash. And so obviously I was trying to find a place where people would want to stay. And maybe that's our cue. And would want to stay and continue with the open source thing. Red Hat was such a company at the time. So, we can ask the question in a different way. What has been our retention so far? On the business and sales side, everybody's gone, pretty much. On the engineering side, nobody's left. So, that tells you a bit how all of that went.
One more question?
Yeah.
Question I would have for you, I know you probably can't talk directly about your deal, but as a software company that's primarily based on subscription, how in the deal are you deriving, what's the process du jour today for deriving a valuation based on a multiple or comps or
right.
Cash flow or how,
right.
how are the deals being consummated?
Right. This is one of the first steps the banker will take you through, which is a valuation sheet. And what they will do is take, obviously the big comp is public market comps, right? How does Wall Street value today the companies? Because, if you get on the other side of the table, the notion of accretiveness comes up a lot, which is if I'm going to spend that amount of cash on you, the way you're valued, I need to have this same, it's not a cash asset, but you need to be valued the same way, otherwise the street's going to kill me. That's basically what accretive value means. And so, if your valuation is based on subscription, and let's say you have hypothetical numbers, one just for the purpose of calculation. Say you have 1 million worth of subscription. Let's say the street values subscription at 10x, and so you expect a $10 million valuation, but you're selling to somebody who's selling a license as opposed to recurring proprietary licenses one time as opposed to recurring subscriptions. Then you'll be valued at 2x, 3x. That's a difference of 7 points, of seven, a lot basically. It doesn't make any sense, is what I'm trying to say. So that question is important, and obviously plays a role. So public company comps, private transactions also come into play, and the way it's going to be presented, you have basically all the comps, and they're going to draw a median. Your company is worth X based on all these comps. Obviously, in terms of metrics they use, even though in our mind we ran the business with, its cash flow, billings cash flow, and EBITDA third, because if you're a high growth subscription company, as you know, right, you if you get $12 in of bookings, you just recognize one, and what are you going to do with the money? Let it sit? No, you invest it. In other words, you're losing money on an EBITDA basis, right? Even though you're making cash. That's one of the difficulties of hypergrowth coupled to the subscription model. But you know, they're going to put all these metrics. That's going to yield a valuation. You're going to eyeball a median and a spread, and that's going to tell you pretty much where you're at. That's what bankers, the first exercise the bankers will take you through.
Okay, let's give a round of applause.
Thanks.
That ends our program for today. See you on February 1st, hopefully. And there's one thing I didn't mention. There's an intersection series starting next week in partnership with Georgia Tech. A three-part series. They have a lot of their top professors on leadership speaking. The whole package is a little over $300. What is it, $370? $375 for a member. Yeah. A lot of leaders in the community are actually signed up for the program. Typically, this program costs $3,000 or $4,000. So if anybody's interested, it's a good deal. We still have some spaces available. Thanks a lot.